Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be revisiting a topic that I haven't talked about in quite some time, and that's just because my opinion on it has changed recently, and that is going to be whether or not you should be using a secondary in Smash Ultimate. Now, this is not a black and white topic. We're going to be delving into all of the specifics in today's video, and let's just get right into it. So if you haven't seen my initial video on the topic, I don't blame you, it was quite some time ago, but basically what I said is that you should pretty much always have a secondary in Smash Ultimate. It's just a really good idea, unless you are playing a handful of characters like Sonic and Pikachu, for example. They don't really need secondaries, and they're extremely high maintenance characters, so it may not be worth dividing the time, but recently I'm kind of starting to slowly shift towards the solo main camp, and I'm going to explain why in the video. So first things first, let's talk about the pros and cons of solo and co-mating. And when I say co-mating, I am including secondaries in this as well. You don't have to be a full co-main, but just playing a multitude of characters at the top level. And the cons of co-mating are very evident, that you just don't get to invest all of your time into your main character. But the pros are also extremely evident, that your matchup chart is just going to be significantly better. It's going to be very rare where you encounter a character that is just going to hard counter you, and you're also able to mix up your tempo depending on which characters you are co-mating. If you're playing a sword character and a projectile character, for example, it is going to be a very different playstyle that you're able to execute, whereas if you're playing just one character, it's all going to be in your timings and the tempo that you're making. And now we got to talk about the pros and cons of being a solo main, and it's pretty much the opposite of everything that I just said. You aren't going to have as solid of a matchup spread unless you're playing a ridiculous character, and we'll get to the character specifics later on because I do think that it's actually quite important. But another thing to consider is how much time you actually get to invest into your character, and you are allowed to be uncomfortable in scenarios where you probably shouldn't be, which is very important. You can learn the bad matchups, you can play through the disadvantage, and yes, it's going to be a disadvantage, but you're going to get better at these uncomfortable scenarios because you're just going to be put in them more. A great example of someone playing a bad matchup to perfection is Light versus Meister at Genesis. The way that Light plays the Game & Watch matchup is honestly quite incredible. I would recommend that if you're struggling with this matchup, you should watch Light play it because he understands the ins and outs of the character, and specifically how Fox is able to deal with it. Typically in a matchup, Light is going to be the aggressor. He is one of the fastest players in the entire world, playing one of the fastest characters in the entire game. Usually he is setting the tempo, but that's not really the case when he's playing versus Game & Watch. A lot of the time, he's waiting for Meister to come to him, he's waiting for Meister to take the swing, and he's going to be whiff punishing it, specifically with dash attack. His dash attack usage in this matchup is exceptional. You'll see him use it to beat Key. Sometimes he'll even go under Nair, which I didn't even know you could do, but that's what you get when you study a matchup that you aren't comfortably. You learn the ins and outs, you learn where Game & Watch has flaws, and you're able to exploit them, because typically Fox is going to be landing a lot on his opponent, but you can't do that versus Game & Watch. He's going to have access to up B out of shield as well as up smash as just a raw kill option, and it's just too risky to go for, so you have to change your entire game plan, and instead of picking up a secondary character like Cloud, for example, just try to better player through Meister. Lyta said, okay, what I usually do doesn't work, here's what I'm going to do instead, because it's not like he doesn't have the tools. Fox is a very good whiff punish character. It's just not the ideal playstyle, but Light, he's found himself in a corner, and he said, instead of switching characters, I'm going to play to Game & Watch's weaknesses and Fox's strengths in the matchup. Fox is very good at whiff punishing. He's not as good at landing on Game & Watch, so he's not going to land on Game & Watch, and he's going to go for the whiff punish. If you are struggling in the Game & Watch matchup, I would highly recommend that you watch Light play it, because he's just so exceptional versus this character on when he chooses his timings, knowing when to take a risk and when to fall back. And I should also add, since Light's damage output is so high, he only needs to win 2 or 3 interactions before he can start going for the kill. And this is a little bit more specific to this matchup since Fox is hitting so hard and Game & Watch is so light. But that's kind of where we're seeing the game go. Characters are hitting a lot harder. You need to win neutral less. So even in your bad matchups, it's okay if you're at the disadvantage, because if you get 1 or 2 outplays, you could start going for the stock, and then you can play with a lead. Another perfect example of someone playing the matchup correctly is going to be Mia versus Hurt. Don't ask me why both of my examples are versus Game & Watch. People just hate this character enough where they dissect him, I guess. But as you can see, Hurt is not using any grenades. He is just straight up boxing with Mia, and that is very unusual for a Snake player because normally they're going to be camping super hard, throwing grenades from the other side of the stage, but you can't do that versus Game Watch because he's going to have access to buckets, so he's going to be playing an extremely scrappy playstyle, and he's using his super long tilts and super massive aerials to actually outspace Mia or with punish him like a dash attack as he does there. And here's going to be a down tilt where he just gets a punish there. He's waiting for Mia to force the narrative, and he understands he can take the swing there. And I'm going to skip a little bit ahead just to show this is the point where Mia is going to get access to the full bucket. Her's just going to mess up into the Kita here. Oh, Mia has full bucket now, and you can immediately see he's pulling out grenades. He's playing completely differently, a more conditional style of Snake, because Mia isn't going to rip the bucket when he's at 200%. So now there's no reason why you shouldn't do that. And normally that's why the Snake Game Watch matchup is so bad, because you're not going to have access to the best thing about Snake, which is his projectiles. But Hurt understands how to box with Game Watch, how to get up and close, and how to use his really strong tilts to actually beat out the character. And when Mia has access to bucket, he's going to immediately be using his projectiles and get the most out of them that he can. And he ends up taking the stock before Mia even gets a chance to kill him here. So he never even uses the bucket because he's not going to use the bucket when Hurt's at 200%. He's literally going to die to a grab at this point. But I just wanted to point out another really smart player on how they adapted to a bad matchup and managed to overcome it. And one of the reasons that I'm starting to lean towards solo maining is because just the top level echelon of this game has had a lot more success with it. You look at the top 10 from 2022, you're going to have 8 people who are at least co-mains, a couple of them playing a multitude of characters, and I say 8 because I'm including the Okola Kazuya, even though maybe you shouldn't, but for 2023, I'm also going to include his Aegis, even if he only used that in one matchup, and I will talk about that later because I still think that's fairly important, but you're only going to have 5 people in this top 10 actually using duo or co-mains because Tweak is going to end up dropping Sephiroth, and you can even argue that MKLeo, who has all of these characters, is pretty much just a Joker main at this point. Ken has dropped Sephiroth. A lot of people are starting to drop all of their secondary characters and just fully invest into their main. Now, I don't think you should be solo maining every single character in Smash Ultimate. There's a lot of characters in this game that I would still recommend you have a secondary for. Pretty much every single character in the B tier, aside from maybe Sheik and Ryu, I would highly recommend that you have a secondary. It's not necessary, of course, but there's just a lot of very difficult matchups that you're going to come with that are easier to overcome with another secondary character because maybe you just don't have the tools, unlike a character like Fox, who definitely has the tools even in his bad matches because of his speed, because of his frame data. And most characters in the A tier, I think you should be solo maining. There's couple of them that I wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't recommend Corrin as a solo main, though it is definitely viable. You're seeing Neo and Shattuck have amazing success, but she's got a lot of very bad matchups and a lot of very good matchups, which is why she's such a good secondary, and I'll talk about good secondary characters in just a second, but I want to focus on these S tier characters specifically because if you are playing one of these characters in the S tier, I would highly recommend that you solo main these characters, especially ones like Joker, Diddy Kong, Snake, Sonic, Peach, because these characters are extremely high maintenance. And yes, it would be nice to not play your bad matchups, but I think it's more important to have your Gyro Zero Deaths unlocked, to have your Joker Gun Tech unlocked, to master the Snake disadvantage, to be able to kill people off one turnip hit with Peach. If you are able to make the best strengths of your character the best they could be, and the worst strengths of your character mitigated, I think you are going to be significantly better off in the bad matchups than just playing a secondary character where you're still comfortable, but you're not quite at your peak. And I want to mention a couple good secondaries as well. The first one is going to be Corrin. She is extremely viable in the current meta. She's going to have an amazing matchup versus Steve, arguably winning that one. Some Corrin players think that she beats Sonic. I personally don't, but I would chalk that matchup up as being even. I think she goes at least even with Game Watch. I think Corrin players are just bad at the Snake matchup. It can be a little bit tricky because a lot of Corrin stuff isn't true, and Snake's going to be able to break out of it with Grenade, but if you're able to space your aerials, which you are very easily able to do around Grenade, it is impossible for Snake to get out of the disadvantage. And there's a bunch of other matchups that she does fairly well in as well. Another good secondary is going to be Min Min. Min Min pretty much invalidates every single character in this tier right here, and a lot of the characters in the A and some even in the S tier because of how good her offstage gameplay is, and that is a very easy character to pick up. All you really need to get on lock is, okay, how do I win neutral one time and how do I kill them offstage, because that's really all that character is. Cloud is another amazing character. If you are good at neutral, you're probably going to have success with Cloud. It's kind of the same thing with Lucina, but Cloud is just a better sword archetype, so I would recommend him. And then in the S tier, Aegis, Rob, and Game Watch are all great choices. I will say I wish more people would solo main Aegis and fully invest into that character because she is so unoptimized. It's not even funny. There's so many things about Aegis, specifically in the advantage state with Nithra, that I think Aegis players are really lacking on. And I think in 2024, we're going to see a lot of those solo main Aegis kind of pulling ahead because they are able to invest fully into the character with one of the best advantage states in the game. There's also a lot of characters in this game that I think are just straight up very unoptimized, and I don't know if that's necessarily because people are not fully investing their time into the character, but I think in order to be a top competitor for the future of Smash Ultimate, you are going to need to optimize your character. Look at Sonic's and Mia, for example. Sonic's has figured out Sonic. He's put a lot of time into the character. He's making that character work, and he's got amazing results from that. It's the exact same thing with Mia as well. They found all the advantages, disadvantages, every little minute detail about their character, and they have fully optimized them, but there's a lot of players and a lot of characters that are not that way at all. You look at Wolf, for example, and this isn't a shot at Wolf players. Well, it kind of is. This character is so unoptimized. We've known about Footstool up he had a shield since like Charlie the King at Ultimate Summit 3, and I have not seen a Wolf player do it since he was at that event, and I don't know why. It's because probably you could just up smash out of shield, and that's not a terrible choice. It's still going to be killing around 110%, but you could be getting kills at like 80% from mid-stage. Wolf is such a strong character that I think has potential to go so much higher on the tier list, and he isn't because the character is just simply very unoptimized right now. Shine combos are another thing that Wolf players haven't even started incorporating into their gameplay, and there are so many characters, specifically in this A tier, that I think have a lot of potential that they just haven't fully met that, and also Sheik in this B tier. I think Sheik is going to get exponentially better, but you can't make Sheik exponentially better if you're playing two characters at once. Sheik is a full-time job. You need to fully invest your time into that character to make your work, and you're seeing people actually do that and have great success. WebJP, for example, he's had some stellar results with this character, but that's because he's put all his time into that character in order to make her work, and there's so many characters in the current state of Smash Ultimate that I don't think you can afford having a secondary character. You need to put all of your time into making your main the best they can be. And something that I kind of mentioned at the start of the video that I want to double back to is picking up a character for one specific matchup, and I should say that this only really works if you're playing one of the top echelon characters in this game, like characters that are in the S tier, a couple characters in the A tier, like Pikachu, for example. I think you could do it with, but picking up a character for one specific matchup is still a very good idea in my opinion. And you're seeing players at the top level have pretty good success with this. You're going to have Mia picking up Game & Watch, or rather Steve, for pretty much just Rosalina. Sometimes he uses it in other matchups, but it's mainly for Rosalina. You're going to have Spargo picking up Corrin for Sonic players, especially for Sonics, because Sonics has gotten so good at the Aegis matchup, and I still think that that is a very good idea. When you're playing some of the more broken characters in this game, you can easily still win -1s, -0.5s, even -2s sometimes, but if there's one matchup that is just super difficult for you, and there's another character that does exceptionally well in it, it's not too difficult to learn an easy character in a matchup where they're having great success. Then you don't have to worry about that one matchup anymore, and there are going to be other matchups where you struggle, but you have more time to invest into them because you're only using your secondary for that one matchup. And as I just said, it only really works if you're playing one of the more broken characters in this game that doesn't have too many super bad matchups that they have to worry about, but it is something to think about. So, in summary, I think that you should be solo mating in the current state of Smash Ultimate, especially if you're at the super top level of this game. I think if you're a low level, mid level, and even a high level player, secondarying isn't a terrible idea just because you're learning to play the game in a multitude of different ways. But if you already have the fundamentals down, learning how to play your character in a lot of different ways, I think is a lot more important. Lightmeister, I'm going to bring it up again because it's just a really good example. Light is taking the playstyle that he usually plays and he's throwing it out the window. He's playing a completely different way, even on the same character, because his character has the tools to be able to play in a multitude of ways, and he's becoming comfortable in an uncomfortable scenario, which is super important. If you can have your back against the wall and still have a solid game plan where you know how to exploit your opponent's weaknesses, that is going to be so important, and it's going to help you in the matchups that aren't even necessarily bad. Like, for example, let's say he's playing Spargo and he's running at Spargo and Spargo is just destroying him, he's beating it up. He has now the knowledge that he can slow it down. He knows how to play the game at a different tempo, and he is able to play that with punish style, and I think that is such an important thing to do. To be able to play your character in a multitude of different tempos and playstyles is crucial, and it's way harder to do that if you're juggling different characters because you're usually just going to default to how you're normally playing that character, and it just allows you to play the character in more aspects. And the other thing is just going to be optimizing your character fully. In the current state of Smash Ultimate, it isn't super necessary, but I think we are going to get to the point where if you're not doing some of the crazy stuff with your character, you are just going to be losing games because other people will be doing it and you'll be dying in one hit. But let me know what y'all think. Do you prefer solo mating, co-mating, secondary, tertiary, or whatever in this game? And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the sport. It's been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!